so practice that he may begin to find a footing in the deeps of the dependent origin. Opening parenthesis. End pop_017. Note 1. Subject to destruction. Khaya-dhamma means that its individual essence is the state of being destroyed. Khayana-sabhava. Opening parenthesis. Vism-mhþ 549. The other expressions are explained in the same way. Note 2. Paþicco as a declinable adjective is not in Patìyamana when it is arrived at, when it is gone to by direct confrontation. upeyamano by means of knowledge going, when it is penetrated to. Abhisamiyamana is the meaning. Vism-mhþ 555. The word paccaya, due to, depending on, and the word paccaya, condition, are both gerunds of pi plus eti or ayati. To go back to. Note 3. The doctrine of eternalism is that beginning, the world and self are eternal. Di 14. That of no cause is that beginning, there is no cause, there is no condition, for the defilement of beings. Di 53. That of fictitious-cause holds that the world's occurrence is due to primordial essence. Prakūti, atoms, aou, time, kala, and so on. That of a power-wielder asserts the existence of an overlord, issara, or of a world soul, Puruåa, or of Pajapati, the lord of the race. Also the doctrines of nature. Sabhava, skr. Svabhava equals individual essence. Fate, niyati, and chance, yadicha, should be regarded as included here under the doctrine of no cause. Some, however, say that the doctrine of fictitious cause is that beginning with the I is the cause of the I, and that the doctrine of the power-wielder is that beginning, things occurring to their own individual essence. CCH 16 n. 23. Opening parenthesis. Vism-mhþ 557. Note 4. Such terms as woman, man, etc. are local forms of speech. Janapada niruti. Because even wise men, instead of saying, fetch the 5 aggregates, or let their mentality materiality come, use the current forms woman and man. This is how, in those who have not fully understood what a physical basis is, there comes to be the insistence. Misinterpretation. This is really a woman, this is really a man. But since this is a mere concept, which depends on states made to occur in such and such wise, one who sees and knows the dependent origination does not insist on misinterpret it as the ultimate meaning. Current speech is speech current in the world. Not overriding is not going beyond. For when a being is said, instead of making an analysis like this, what is the lasting being here? Is it materiality? Or feeling? And so on, one who does not override current usage should express a worldly meaning in ordinary language as those in the world, employing the usage current in the world. Vism-mhþ 557-58. The explanation differs somewhat from MN 139. Note 5. The term analyzer, Vibhajavadan, appears at A 5190, and at M 2197, in this sense, used to describe the Buddha and his followers, who do not rashly give unqualified answers to questions that need analyzing before being answered. Note 6. The law, Dharma, is the text of the dependent origination. The meaning, atta, is the meaning of that. Or they are the cause, and the fruit of the cause here, is what is meant. Or law, dharma, is regularity, dharmata. Now some, misinterpreting the meaning of the sutta passage, whether perfect ones arise or do not arise, there yet remains that element. S225. Wrongly describe the regularity of the dependent origination as a permanent dependent origination, instead of which it should be described as having the individual essence of a cause. Puruåa. defined according to its own fruit, in the way stated. And some misinterpret the meaning of the dependent origination thus, without cessation, without arising, and upeyamano, instead of taking the unequivocal meaning in the way stated. Vism-mhþ 561. The last mentioned quotation without cessation, without arising, and upeyamano, seems almost certainly to refer to a well-known stanza in Nagarjuna's Mulamadhyamika Karika. Anarodhoyan Padiyanachadyawasratyanakathiyananathyanagamayaniagamiye pratichasamut padiprakpinko power-wielder. Dio ayamasa sambuddhas tivan vardativari. Note 7. Formations accumulate, work, for the purpose of rebirth. So that is their function. To accumulate is to heap up. Consciousness's function is to go before, since it precedes mentality, materiality at rebirth linking. Mentality's function is to associate, since it joins with consciousness in a state of mutuality. Inseparability of its components is owing to their having no separate existence, mentality here being feeling, perception, and formations. Materiality is dispersible since it has in itself nothing beyond the water element to hold it absolutely together, so its function is to be dispersed. That is why, when rice grains, etc., are pounded, they get scattered and reduced to powder. It is called indeterminate to distinguish it from mentality, which is profitable, etc. At different times. Vism-mhþ 571. Note 8. No theory is unknowing about suffering, etc. Wrong theory is perverted perception of what is foul, etc. as beautiful, etc. Or else no theory is unassociated with false view, and wrong theory is associated with it. Vism-mhþ 751. This use of the word Pajapati as theory, rare in Pali but found in Sanskrit, is not in Ped. An alternative rendering for these two terms might be agnosticism and superstition. See also 14. 177. Note 9. With the nature of result, and so on. The words and so on here include neither trainer nor non-trainer. DHS2. Conducive to fetters. DHS3. And so on. Section 54 mundane resultant and so on. The words and so on here include indeterminate. DHS2. Formed. DHS2. And so on. With root cause and without root cause, and so on. The words and so on here include prompted, unprompted, and so on. Vism-mhþ. Note 10. This refers to the teacher Rivata. Vism-mhþ 582. Note 11. Which are contingent upon other such states. Because it is said without distinction of all visible databases, and of all mental databases, there is consequently no Dharma state. Among the formed, unformed, and conceptual dharmas classed as sixfold under visible data, etc. That does not become an object condition. Vism-mhþ 584. Note 12. Proximity and contiguity conditions are not stated in accordance with the distinction between making occur and giving opportunity, as the absence and disappearance conditions are. Rather they are stated as the causes of the regular order of consciousness in the cognitive series. Vism-mhþ 585. Note 13. This refers to the elder Rivata too. Vism-mhþ 586. Note 14. The state of proximity condition is the ability to cause arising proximately, without interval. Because there is no interval between the cessation of the preceding and the arising of the subsequent. The state of contiguity condition is the ability to cause arising by being quite proximate, without interval, through approaching, as it were, identity with itself owing to absence of any distinction that this is below, above, or around that, which is because of lack of any such co-presence as in the case of the components of the material groups, and because of lack of any co-positionality of the condition and the conditionally arisen. and in general, because of the uninterestedness of all states. Dhamma. When a given state has ceased, or is present, in a given mode, and other states, Dhamma, come to be possessed of that particular mode, it is that state's mode that must be regarded as what is called ability to cause arising. Vism-mhþ 586. Note 15. Reviewing change of lineage. The consciousness that precedes the path consciousness applies to stream enterers. Reviewing cleansing. The cleansing that consists in attaining a higher path than the first applies to once returners and non-returners. See Vism-mhþ 589. Note 16. The presence athi condition is not applicable to nibbana, for a presence condition is that which is unhelpful by its absence of existingness, athi bhava, and becomes helpful by obtaining existingness. And nibbana does not, after being unhelpful by its own absence of existingness to those states that have nibbana as their object, become helpful to them by obtaining existingness. Or alternatively, the presence condition, which by its non-existingness is the opposite of helpfulness to those states that are associated with arising, etc., is helpful to them by its existingness. So nibbana is not a presence condition. Vism-mhþ 597. It may be noted that athi has more than one use, among which the following two may be mentioned. Athi is equals upeyamano, is a. apprehendable, and b. not a self-contradictory impossibility. Athi, behave, ayati, there is an unborn, udati, and the discussion on the existence of nibbana. 16. ff. Closing parenthesis. Athi is equals upana, arisen. Ce. behave, rupai jati pataputi athi tasa salka, of the materiality that is born, manifested, it is said that it is. S271f. Closing parenthesis. The athi paccaya, presence condition, being implicitly equated with the latter, cannot be applied to nibbana because nibbana is not subject to arising. OI 152. Note 17. The assertion of a single cause, Puruåa, is undesirable because it follows that there would be production of everything all the time, and because it follows that there would be a single homogeneous state. Opening parenthesis. Vism-mhþ 599. Cf. 19. Note 18. Pariharavekana, explanation. Not imped in this sense. Note 19. Avi, a goat or sheep. Not imped. The Vism text reads. Which renders thus. As to ox hair and ram's hair, etc. And the rest. Ox hair and ram's hair are conditions for the unlike dubba. Dabba, grass, a ram. Avi, should be understood as a red sheep. Aka, semicolon. Horn is for reeds. Sarah, semicolon. Curds, sesame flour and molasses are for Puruåa grass. Moss is for the Taujuli yucca plant. A she-donkey is for a mule. And so on in this way is included by the word etc. Opening parenthesis. Vism-mhþ 601. Except for the last mentioned, it seems problematical why these things, if rightly interpreted, should be conditions for the things mentioned. Note 20. For 5 constituent becoming, etc. See sections 253 to 54. Unprofitable resultant I consciousness, etc. Sometimes arise even in Brahmas when undesirable visible data, etc. come into focus. Vism-mhþ 604. Semicolon. Cf. Section 180. Note 21. This refers to the old Sinhalese commentary no longer extant. Note 22. Viva. B. Add sudhaya va javanavithya here, as in section 140 below in all texts. Note 23. With the appearance of fire and flames, etc. in the hells is said owing to likeness to that appearance of hell and fire does not itself come into focus for him then. Vism-mhþ 607. Note 24. The Vism-mhþ Dani adds more details here. When hell appears it does so like a metal cauldron. When the human world appears, the mother's womb appears like a woolen slipper. Kambala yana, for yana as footwear or sandals CMA 3222. When the heavenly world appears, wishing trees, divine palaces and couches, etc. appear. Vism-mhþ remarks here, by the words, the appearance of the mother's womb, etc. Only visual appearance is given as the sign of destiny. Herein, in the first place it would be logical that sound has not been given in the commentaries as a sign of destiny because it is included in the happy destinies as not clung to. But the reason for odor, etc. not having been given, will be inquired into. Vism-mhþ 609. This question is in fact dealt with at length at Vism-mhþ 611, but the arguments are not reproduced here. See note 26 below. Note 25. Issa-bhava, with sex, and abhava, without sex, are not to be confused with sa-bhava, opening parenthesis, individual essence, and abhava, absence, non-existence. Note 26. Vism-mhþ. p. 611. Has a long discussion here of the difficulty of speaking of the Brahma world, where there are only the senses of seeing and hearing, in terms of the decades, which contain the components of odor and flavor. It ends by defending the Visuddhimagga standpoint. Note 27. Samahāvino Dani. b. has rebirth linking with a past, not so classifiable, and present object next to and so on. Note 28. See the classification of kamma at 19. ff. Repeated. Samasavita. Kamma is not mentioned there as such. Of near kamma Vism-mhþ says, it is that performed next to death, or which is conspicuous in the memory then, whenever it was performed. Vism-mhþ 617. Note 29. Sign of the kamma is the event, vathu, by means of which a man accumulates kamma through making it the object at the time of accumulation. Even if the kamma was performed as much as 100,000 eons ago, nevertheless at the time of its ripening it appears as kamma or sign of kamma. The sign of the destiny is one of the visual scenes in the place where rebirth is due to take place. It consists in the visual appearance of flames of fire, etc. to one ready to be reborn in hell, and so on as already stated. Vism-mhþ 617. Note 30. Owing to craving being unabandoned, and because the previously arisen continuity is similarly deflected, consciousness occurs inclining, leaning and tending towards the place of rebirth linking. The connascent formations are the volitions connascent with the impulsion consciousness next to death. Or they're all those that begin with contact. They fling consciousness onto that place of rebirth linking, which is the object of the kamma and so on. The meaning is that they occur as the cause for the establishment of consciousness on the object by rebirth linking as though flinging it there. Vism-mhþ 617. Note 31. As a continuous process consisting of death, rebirth linking, and the adjacent consciousnesses. Vism-mhþ 617. Note 32. Paisiddhata, because, excluded. Paisiddha is not in ped. Abhisalkara here might mean planting work, not formative processes. Note 33. Vism-mhþ points out that this is generally but not always so, since deities see such portents of their death as the fading of their flowers, etc., which are undesirable visible data. See note 43. Note 34. A Sinhalese text adds the following paragraph. Also the bodily formation, when giving rebirth linking, gives the whole of its results in the sense sphere becoming alone in the 4 generations, in the 5 destinies, in the first 2 stations of consciousness, and in 2 abodes of beings. Therefore it is a condition in the way already stated for the 23 kinds of consciousness in 1 kind of becoming. 4 generations, 5 destinies, 2 stations of consciousness, and 2 abodes of beings, both in rebirth linking and in the course of an existence. The same method applies to the verbal formation. But the mental formation does not fail to ripen anywhere except in 1 abode of beings. Therefore it is a condition in the way already stated for the 32 kinds of resultant consciousness. As appropriate. In the 3 kinds of becoming, 4 generations, 5 destinies, 7 stations of consciousness, and 8 abodes of beings, both in rebirth linking and in the course of an existence. There is no consciousness with formations as condition in the non-percipient abode of beings. Furthermore, in the case of non-percipient beings, the formation of met is a condition, as can a condition acting from a different time, for the kinds of materiality due to karma performed. Note 35. Resolve compound agahit-agaharona as garhit-asara-garharona, not as agahit-asagarharona. i.e. it is by not taking what is taken, not by taking what has not been taken. Cf. IV. Note 36. This means due to the heat element in the materiality that arose together with the rebirth linking consciousness. It is because the heart basis is arisen only at that very moment, that there is weakness of the physical basis. Vism-mhþ 622. Note 37. Vahanika, having a float. Not in ped. The context suggests a catamaran, universal in Indian waters. Note 38. The expression ekadesasarapakasesa is grammatically explained at Vism-mhþ 623. See allied expressions, katekasesa and ekasiskate. Cf. Peni 2, 64. Note 39. Rasayana, elixir. Not in ped. Cf. DA 568 and Uda. Commentary to erudate. Closing parenthesis. Note 40. Though feeling as condition is said in order to prevent a generalization from the preceding words with feeling as condition to the effect that craving arises in the presence of every condition accompanied by feeling, but is it not impossible to prevent overgeneralization in the absence of any such statements as feeling accompanied by inherent tendency is a condition for craving? No. For we're dealing with an exposition of the round of rebirths. Since there is no round of rebirths without inherent tendencies, so far as the meaning is concerned it may be taken for granted that the condition is accompanied by inherent tendency. Or alternatively, it may be recognized that this condition is accompanied by inherent tendency because it follows upon the words with ignorance as condition. And with the words with feeling as condition, craving the ruling need is this. There is craving only with feeling as condition, and not with feeling as condition there is only craving. Vism-mhþ. For inherent tendencies see 22. 60. Mn 64. The Arahant has none. Note 41. Paccaya, great pox or great leprosy. Not in ped. See kuha. Note 42. has sasat in t. Air has sassadt. Viva. B. Na sasata dt. Note 43. Their flowers wither, their clothes get dirty, sweat comes from their armpits, their bodies become unsightly, and they get restless. CMA 4170. Note 44. As regards these 4 paragraphs from the Paþicca, see sections 292, 294, 296, and 297. All 4 end with the word paccaya. Nom. Place. And abl. S. Of paccaya equals condition. In the first and third paragraphs. And 296. This is obviously nom. Place. And agrees with I am khaya-dhamma. These 5 things. but in the second and fourth paragraphs the context suggests vipaka, results, instead of conditions. However, there is no doubt that the accepted reading is paccaya here too. For the passage is also quoted in 19. In the Sammahavino Dani, paccaya kara vibhaga commentary equals present context. And at MAI 53. The Paramattamanjusa and Mularika do not mention this point. The Saddhamapakasini, Paisimbita commentary, comments on the first paragraph. Purumakama bivasmintiata tajatiya kamabarbikariya main pavata. Idha paisandhiya paccaya paccapana paisandhiya paccaya, and on the second paragraph. Idh upapativavasmai pure katasha kamasa paccaya paccapan v paccabhavyata tajatiri katasha kamasa paccayina pavati tiyatho. The Madhyamaya Nikaya Ika, MAI 53, says of the second paragraph, Ime paccaya time vinayodayo pankakahasiko-dhamma. Puramarbhavi katasha kamasa, kamavasa, paccaya, paccayabhavato, tipaka, idha, etarahi, upapativavasmayu upapati bhavabhivana va honti tiyatho. From these comments it is plain enough that paccaya in the second and fourth paragraphs is taken as ABL. Sing. Opening parenthesis. E.g. Avijja paccaya salkara. There is a parallel ablative construction with genitive at Pis 272, 1. Gati sampatya nawasampayutahana ihetani paccaya upati. Perhaps the literal rendering of the second and fourth paragraph's final sentence might be, thus there are these 5 things here in the present rebirth process becoming with their condition consisting of karma done in the past, and so on. The point is unimportant. Note 45. Sorrow, etc. have already been established as ignorance. But death consciousness itself is devoid of ignorance and formations and is not a condition for the next becoming. That is why, because it assures sorrow, etc., is said. Vism-mhþ 640. Note 46. Avatha, occasion. Not in ped. Note 47. Avyapara, uninterest. Here the equivalent of anaboga, civ. And ix. The perhaps unorthodox form uninterest has been used to avoid the unselfish sense sometimes implied by disinterestedness. Vyapara is clearly intended throughout this work as motivated action in contrast with blind action of natural forces. The word interest has therefore been chosen to bring out this effect. Note 48. The dependent origination, or structure of conditions, appears as a flexible formula with the intention of describing the ordinary human situation of a man in his world, or indeed any conscious event where ignorance and craving have not entirely ceased. That situation is always complex, since it is implicit that consciousness with no object, or being, bhava, becoming, or however rendered, without consciousness of it, is impossible except as an artificial abstraction. The dependent origination, being designed to portray the essentials of that situation in the limited dimensions of words and using only elements recognizable in experience, is not a logical proposition. Descartes' cogito is not a logical proposition. Nor is it a temporal cause and effect chain. Each member has to be examined as to its nature in order to determine what its relations to the others are, e.g., whether successive in time or connascent, positive or negative, etc. etc. Closing parenthesis. A purely cause and effect chain would not represent the pattern of a situation that is always complex, always subjective, objective, static, dynamic, positive, negative, and so on. Again, there is no evidence of any historical development in the various forms given within the limit of the Sutta Pitaka. Leaving aside the Pisum-mhþ and historical treatment within that particular limit is likely to mislead, if it is hypothesis with no foundation. Parallels with European thought have been avoided in this translation. But perhaps an exception can be made here, with due caution, in the case of Descartes. The revolution in European thought started by his formula cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am, is not yet ended. Now, it will perhaps not escape notice that the two elements, I think and I am, in what is not a logical proposition, parallel to some extent the two members of the dependent origination, consciousness and being. Becoming. In other words, consciousness activated by craving and clinging as the dynamic factory, guided and blinkered by ignorance. I think, or consciousness with the conceit I am. Conditions being. Therefore I am. In a complex relationship with other factors relating subject and object. Not accounted for by Descartes. The parallel should not be pushed too far. In fact, it is only introduced because in Europe the dependent origination seems to be very largely misunderstood with many strange interpretations placed upon it. And because the cogito does seem to offer some sort of reasonable approach. In this work, for convenience because of the special importance attached here to the aspect of the death-rebirth link. The dependent origination is considered from only one standpoint, namely, as applicable to a period embracing a minimum of 3 lives. But this is not the only application. With suitable modifications it is also used in the Vibhaga to describe the structure of the complex in each one of the 89 single-type consciousnesses laid down in the Dharma-saugawi. And Bhadantakariya Buddhaghosa says, this structure of conditions is present not only in a continuity period consisting of multiple consciousnesses but also in each single consciousness as well. Viva 199-200. Also the Paþimukhaí gives 5 expositions for describing dependent origination in one life, the 5th being made to present a special inductive generalization to extend what is observable in this life. The fact that consciousness is always preceded by consciousness, cf. This ch. Section 83f. i.e. that it always has a past and is inconceivable without one. Back beyond birth, and since craving and ignorance ensure its expected continuance on after death, there are besides various other, differing applications indicated by the variant forms given in the suttas themselves. Endnote pop_017